All right, let's talk handguns. You know, there are a few topics out there that get people really fired up. And right at the top of that list is the classic showdown, the 45 ACP versus the 9mm. Man, this debate has been going on for, over 100 years? So today, we're gonna dive deep and really explore the argument for America's original big bore legend.
And really, this whole massive debate, it all boils down to one pretty simple question. With all our modern ammunition technology, the fancy hollow points and all that, does bigger really mean better? Does the sheer size of that bullet still make a critical difference?
And this right here, this is kind of the modern flashpoint. See, the FBI famously switched back to the 9mm, and their whole argument was that modern bullet tech makes the two rounds basically identical in terms of performance. But the source material we're looking at today makes a really compelling case that, maybe that's not the whole story. And to really get why, we've got to go back, way back.
So to really get a handle on this, you gotta look at where these two legendary cartridges came from. And as you're about to see their birth stories, they couldn't be more different.
So what's pretty interesting is that the 9mm actually came first. It was developed back in 1901 in Europe for the famous Luger pistol. It was only a few years after that the legendary John Browning came along and designed the .45 ACP, specifically for the US military. And of course, that led to it being adopted right alongside the iconic M1911 pistol. And right there, in their origins, you see two completely different ways of thinking. The 9mm, that was all about this new era of semi-automatic pistols taking over Europe. But the .45 ACP? Whoa. That was born from a really specific and pretty brutal US military requirement. They needed a handgun round powerful enough to stop a charging horse. Not just the rider, the horse itself. And all of that brings us right to the heart of this whole thing, the very controversial and honestly often misunderstood idea of stopping power. I mean, it's a term that gets thrown around all the time, so let's actually break down what it means. Okay, so at its core, this whole argument is really just about basic physics. We're talking about something called the wound channel. That's just the path of destruction the bullet makes. And it's pretty logical, right? A wider bullet is going to create a wider initial wound channel right from the very second it hits. So let's look at the actual numbers. A .45 ACP round starts out at 0.451 inches across. A 9mm, it starts at just 0.355 inches. And listen, this is the really critical point from the source. The .45 starts its job at a size that a 9mm can only hope to get to after it expands perfectly. And that word right there, expansion, that is the huge flaw in the whole argument that modern bullets have leveled the playing field. See, the entire theory rests on the idea that a modern hollow point bullet is going to expand perfectly every single time. But that's just not how it works in the real world. Yeah, according to the source material, and this is based on talks with law enforcement, tactical experts, the number of times these high-tech pistol bullets fail to expand, it's shockingly high. So think about that. If your bullet doesn't open up, what are you left with? You're right back to comparing the original size of the bullet, that .355 versus that .451. And the source gives this really powerful real-world example to drive this home. There was a shooting where an intruder was hit with just a single, standard, non-expanding .45 round, basic hardball ammo. And that one bullet had such a decisive, fight-stopping impact that the intruder's leg had to be amputated. That is what we're talking about when we say baseline diameter matters, especially when expansion doesn't happen. Okay, but the case for the .45 isn't just about the wound channel. There are some other really practical and often overlooked advantages, and yes, some trade-offs to think about too. All right, let's talk recoil, because a lot of people just assume the .45 is this uncontrollable beast, right? But the source uses this perfect description. The recoil thuds rather than snaps. It's more of a heavy, slow push, a thud, not that sharp, high-velocity snap you get from a 9mm. And a lot of shooters, even people with smaller frames, are really surprised by how manageable it actually is. The .45 also has some pretty unique benefits, both tactically and just mechanically. For one, the standard round is already subsonic. That means it's perfect to use with a suppressor, and you don't need to buy special, more expensive ammo. And then there's the pressure. A .45 operates at way lower pressure than a 9mm. We're talking around 21,000 psi compared to over 35,000 for the 9mm. And what that means for you is just less stress, less wear and tear on your gun over time. It's going to last longer. Okay, so let's just quickly sum up the trade-offs here. With the .45, Yeah, you're usually going to have a lower magazine capacity. But what you gain is that manageable thud recoil, the fact that it's naturally quiet for suppressors and less wear on your gun. The big downsides, though, that lower capacity and, as we're about to see, the price. Yeah, you just can't ignore the financial side of this. There's really no way around it. .45 ACP ammo costs a lot more than 9mm. I mean, look at the cost for 1,000 rounds of similar ammo. The difference is huge. And for anyone who actually goes to the range and shoots a lot, that is a major, major factor. All right, so after looking at the history, the physics, the pros, the cons, what's the final verdict? Is one just better? Well, according to the source, it's not quite that simple. See, instead of giving a single one-size-fits-all answer, the recommendation is to think of it as the right tool for the job. For something like home defense, right? Close quarters, you need to end a threat right now. That's where the raw power of the 45 is really favored. But for concealed carry, where you're out and about, the higher capacity and the slimmer, lighter package of a 9mm pistol, well, that's often the more practical choice. So, when you boil it all down, the conclusion from our source is this. Look, the 9mm is a fantastic, practical cartridge. No one's arguing that. But when your number one absolute priority is to stop a threat as quickly and decisively as humanly possible, the 45 ACP, well, it just brings a level of fight-stopping authority that's pretty tough to match. And that really leaves us with the ultimate question, the one you have to answer for yourself. When it really counts, and you're facing all these trade-offs we've talked about, what do you prioritize more? Is it capacity, the number of rounds you have? Or is it authority, the undeniable impact of every single one of those rounds?